we talk a lot about owner self-awareness. It's really important that they accept that I need some help or assistance or need someone who has a different skill set. And that's what my company, would really benefit from at this point.
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by OneAccord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Value Factory, presented by OneAccord. I'm your host, Andrew Ballard, and we've got an exciting topic and a great speaker. We're going to talk about the founder's dilemma and what you do when your company outgrows your comfort level. It's actually a very common occurrence as companies scale. The old adage is whatever got you to where you are isn't going to get you to where you want to be. And our guest today is Steve Nasca. He is a principal here at OneAccord. He most often serves in fractional executive capacities as the CEO or president, lots of different industries, just a tremendous experience. Steve's been a CEO for over 25 years, leading several large organizations across multiple industries. Welcome, Steve. I am so grateful to have you on our podcast.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here.
So let's kick this off. How many times have you encountered the founder's dilemma and succeeded or supplemented a founder, helped them, kind of break through that dilemma?
Yeah, I'd say I guess maybe 4 times I've encountered what I've always called the founder's dilemma, and I actually learned there's a book with the same title published in 2013. But I've been using the phrase for longer than that, so hopefully we'll get to talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I'd say on about 4 occasions I've come in where a founder has kind of found himself out over his skis, if you will.
Sure.
And have been able to succeed that founder in a couple of occasions and actually supplement the founder in a couple other occasions. So it's been kind of split down the middle.
Okay, great. So why don't you share with our audience what the founder's dilemma is?
Yeah, I guess what I've always referred to as the founder's dilemma is that situation where you've had a crafts person, for instance, who's really, really good at the thing. And they've used whatever that talent is to create a business that because they're so good at the thing, that business grows to a point where there's a lot of complexity that sort of outstrips their ability to manage it. Again, if you're good at that thing, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily good at running a multi-million-dollar company or, handling a review of financial statements and all the things that go along with a increasingly large enterprise. So that to me,
scaling.
Yeah, exactly. And that to me is what I've often found in my career. And I think we often find in our engagements with OneAccord is somebody who is really good at something, really smart and focused in a certain area, but they've been so successful that the company has kind of outgrown their comfort zone, as you discussed up front.
Great. And I think you touched on this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why does this happen to a founder?
Yeah, I mean, having been a CEO for 25 plus years, I've always used the phrase that my job's not more important, it's just different. And so, when that person, whatever they may be, a woodworking expert or a brewer or, a restaurateur, they use the talent that they've developed in that arena to drive a business, but it doesn't mean that they've been trained in the things it takes to run a large business. Again, there's an awful lot that goes into growing a business, leading a sales organization, managing financial, P&L and balance sheet, and all of those things that you aren't necessarily trained for in the discipline that may have made you successful in your business.
Right. I was reading some data points from the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and one of the stats that just jumped out at me, and I think it's related to this founder's dilemma, is that After 10 years, only 5% of startups are still operating.
Right. Right.
95% fail in that 10-year period. I think 80% fail in the first 5 years. And I think it's probably tied to them, maybe being an expert in the product or service that led them to starting their company. But when it comes to operating and growing a business, it's an evolution. Things
Yes.
continue to evolve, they change. And what you did to get from 0 to 5 millions, not going to get you from 5 to 25 and
That's
beyond.
right.
It really requires a different level, knowledge, skills, etc. So
Yep.
talk a little bit about some of the things that you have done to help the founders succeed, in terms of supplementing them.
Yeah, I think in many cases, and I'm thinking of an example that to me was one of the most refreshing examples of one of my OneAccord engagements is, you had a young founder who had grown and was running the business very successfully, but he didn't need to be told that he was someplace he'd never been. So he invited OneAccord in and said, look, we're doing fine, but I've never been here before and I could really use some, experienced leadership and guidance. And really one of the things we were able to do most effectively for him is create an awareness of the metrics or KPIs that he ought to be looking at for his business. And really that sort of dashboard approach, which says, if you're going to be the most responsible person in your business, don't wait for someone to report something to you. Let's create a dashboard that gives you the visibility on a day-to-day basis to the health of your business. And so, those things, really helping to build out a staff of experienced leaders in businesses where it takes some of that burden off the founder. They don't have to be the one leading the sales charge or trying to. They don't have to be the one trying to figure out what, accounting metrics or measures that they ought to be focused on. So really kind of building out the organization for the scope of the business has been a lot of what I've been able to achieve.
That's fantastic. In fact, I'd love your take on this. With our clients, we've used the stoplight dashboard. Now, each KPI has a little
Yep.
stoplight. And if you're on point, if you're hitting your targets or above, surpassing them, that conditional formatting in the dashboard keeps green.
Yep.
However, if you're a little bit off, maybe 2 to 9.5, 10% behind, then the stoplight goes to yellow. And then
Opportunity.
if you're more than 10% off, it automatically goes to red.
Yep.
And the conventional thinking is that if it's yellow or amber, you need to pay attention to it. If it's red, you need to act on it. And I really part company with my colleagues. And my belief is, and this is where I want your guidance, is that if you actually took action when it turns yellow, you won't see red. Don't wait till it gets red before fixing the issue. There's a reason that you're off plan.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Andrew. Yellow means you're not trending in the right direction in many
Right.
cases. And look, most people are so visual. I really do like that. And I've used it in a lot of different organizations. I really do like that stoplight sort of reporting because, as soon as you look at that metric, it's one of those colors and you know exactly what that means. It's
Right.
easy to focus in those areas that need your attention the most.
Outstanding. So, in terms of the founder's dilemma, what makes this so difficult for the owner, the founder, the CEO?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we run into a lot, or I have run into a lot, is that's a prideful person, right? They're very good at what they do. And sometimes it takes a little bit to have them understand that you might not be good at all of the things that it takes to run the organization. So again, kind of getting past pride, which was what was so refreshing about the example I shared earlier is, this young man, he was devoid of pride in the sense that he said, hey, we're doing great, but I could use some guidance. And
Sounds like a pretty smart young guy.
yeah, yeah, I was very impressed with him. The other thing I think is, hey, it's what you referred to earlier. We've always done it this way, and it's been successful so far, helping them understand that the challenges of a larger, expanding, scaling organization are going to be different than what you have faced in the history of your company to date. So,
Mhm.
we talk a lot about owner self-awareness. It's really important that they accept that I need some help or assistance or need someone who has a different skill set, and that's what my company, would really benefit from at this point.
Well, I have not sat in the CEO chair anywhere near as many times as you have, but I was the CEO, have been the CEO of three different companies. And one thing I learned very early on, and that is to build a team around you whom are smarter than you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not very hard for me to do. That's a pretty short putt if you're a golfer. But
Yeah.
that was really a key to success, was bringing people in that were smarter than I was, that had different skill sets, and making sure that we had, those functional categories, like finance, technology,
Sure.
operations, marketing, sales, HR, et cetera. Make sure that we have people that are really experts in those functional areas, and that makes a
Yep.
difference. So
Yeah, it totally does.
how do you remedy the founder's dilemma?
Well, I think in any of the leadership roles I've held, this next statement holds true. You have to find wins that resonate with the individual, right? And so once you're able to sort of show that owner some things that the company is doing better with your help or your guidance, and things that really make their lives more reasonable or help them achieve their goals, whether those goals are continued growth or getting a company ready for sale, if you're able to show those tangible results that really matter to that owner or founder, I think you win them over pretty quickly. And again, that's true for, I think, all of leaders with their teams. But, I want to go back on something you just said, which I think was really important. One of the benefits I've had about being in a bunch of different industries is it's forced me to be collaborative, because I've never walked into a business and was the subject matter expert, right? I was good at, leadership, administration, finance, that leader, whatever the role entailed, but I didn't know the product better than the people there. Or I didn't know the industry better than the people there. And so it immediately forced me to be collaborative. And I think you gain trust that way as well, both with an owner and, maybe key members of the team.
Yeah. And I know you and have worked with you long enough to know that one of the qualities that you have that I think has really led to helping the companies that, where you're a fractional CEO or even interim or full time, is
Hmm.
because you don't have an ego. You're very humble and you're very
Yeah.
quick to share the credit with the team. And
Yes.
I think that that really rallies the troops, and as you say, it's just very good for morale.
Thank you. That's
One of
nice
my
of you to say.
well, it's 100%
There
true.
are probably people who would argue with the no ego comment, but I try not to lead with that.
Would they be possibly family members?
They might be married to me.
I'd be afraid to have you talk to my wife. She would expose all of my fallacies. I give
Yeah,
her a
well,
lot of material to work from.
it
We'll just
works
leave
that
it
way
that
often,
way.
doesn't it?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, what does it take to be successful? I mean, you're looking at the founder system. And actually, I have a question before that. And that is, when you get contacted, say, by this young fellow that had no
Mhm.
ego, obviously a very intelligent, a smart person, do you have some sort of a standard assessment or a set of questions that you ask to help you understand where the gaps are? I'm just trying to
Yeah,
think practically how you start this conversation.
go ahead. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I have always tried to do that personally. And whether, on the engagements that or excuse me, on the opportunities I had as a leadership as a leader, excuse me, following a founder. So, there were questions like, what are you struggling with today? What's your or what's your 1 in 5, maybe 10-year vision for the company? What are the really important things that you're trying to achieve? And so I've always done that personally, but I also think OneAccord does a great job in its customer success plan process of asking those really important, critical focus questions about, where are the owners trying to take the business? What is their ultimate goal? Is it growth? Is it exit? What are the stumbling blocks or things that they struggle with? And I think the more you have that dialogue, the more they understand that, you have a sense for what helps drive a business's success, and that you're also empathetic to them and what they're trying to achieve and the obstacles to achieve it.
Excellent. Excellent. So, kind of back to my initial question, what does it take in your mind to be successful?
Well, gosh, I think I could attribute any of the success that I've had in my career to really having great people around me, really surrounding myself with people who cared as much or more than I did. Hopefully not more, but certainly hopefully as much, because you can't teach that, right? You can't teach someone to have an ethic to when you're not there to look over their shoulder. And so micromanagement's never been an option or at all attractive to me. So if you can really be fortunate enough to surround yourself with a few of those key people, in some of these cases, it's an owner partnering up with someone like me or another OneAccord principal and just having someone to share the battle with. In other circumstances, it's about building out a team of people that you really feel strongly get the vision, and conduct themselves in a way that moves us toward our mutual goals. So, it's really about, that collaborative pursuit of the vision, and really finding the right people to get the job done.
Excellent. And, as you're working with lots of different founders, you're dealing with different levels of skill. You're dealing with, completely different communications and personality.
Oh yeah.
And I think you really have to tailor your approach to each person. And so each engagement's totally unique. Would you say?
Yeah, I would. That's absolutely true. And yes, there's nuances to all of them. I mean, I've been involved in situations where the owners don't talk, owners don't speak to each other because there's so much animosity. And then I've encountered some owners that have such an incredible blind spot in certain areas that you scratch your head. I ran across about a $25 million business that really didn't have any semblance of financial statements. So, that's just something where you go,
That's
gosh,
mind blowing.
I never even considered that was a possibility, but it's, you encounter all sorts of different things. And so I think keeping an even, I try to keep an even keel, keep a calm head, because sometimes things do get emotional. It is hard for a founder who's been really successful in what they do to give away a little of that control and to welcome and invite someone into their business, because that business defines them in many ways. And so I think that trust and winning over their confidence becomes so much more important because of those factors.
I want to go back to something that you said a few moments ago, and it has to do with, there are some skills you can teach, but the soft skills, character, ethics, and all these kind of things,
Yeah.
that they've grown up being hardwired for that, and those are very difficult
Yeah,
to
that's
teach.
true.
And I heard somebody say, the definition of character is how you act when nobody's looking.
Yeah,
And
I
I,
fully
I,
believe that.
yeah, I just never forgot that. I thought that was so great.
Yep.
So we know how to remedy it. We know some of the things that causes it. You've shared what it takes to be successful. So what do favorable outcomes look like? Could you give us some practical examples?
Yeah, it all starts with the goals of the owners, right? I mean, um, and those can vary widely. I've given two of the most common examples, which is navigating growth and preparing for exit. So, navigating growth is easy to measure. I like to talk about, again, because I have a finance background and have run companies for a long time, I like to talk about growth both in terms of revenue and profitability, right? I mean, the latter being more important in my mind.
You've got to
And
work both ends of the P&L, don't you?
well, yeah, you do. I mean, there's a lot of growth that by its very nature will sink a company faster than, than anything else,
Right.
because if it's low margin business or it's business that's kind of taking your focus away, that can be bad for a business. But, metrics to measure those are pretty obvious. And then, we've had good outcomes. I've had good outcomes where We've gotten a business teed up to sell and to sell for a multiple that they didn't think was possible when they engaged. And so, those are really satisfying because you're helping an owner who has poured his or herself into the business for
Right.
many years and in a very meaningful way realize the fruits of their labor. And that's a pretty satisfying thing. So I've had a few successful exits for owners. I've had exits that got owners out from under some very difficult circumstances financially. And that's almost equally satisfying because, folks have personal guarantees and houses on the line and things that
Right.
you'd like to help them maintain. And so, yeah, those are some of the favorable outcomes you look for, but they can be even more subtle than that, right? I mean, it can be, hey, how do we get into a new market and that drives sales? Or how do we become an employer of choice? That was one that in one of the companies I was fortunate enough to run that became a real goal of ours, is because we had great employees and we wanted to show them that this was a place they wanted to be and could call home. And so, there's a lot of benchmarks along the way that can be very satisfying and symbols of success, if you will, depending on what the goals are going in.
Yeah. And like you're saying, a positive culture really is great for morale and it reduces defection. You're not,
Yeah.
I mean, replacing a key position can be very expensive.
Yes.
I mean, it's not just about recruiting, it's about onboarding and, they don't have the institutional knowledge that maybe the person had that recently left. It can be a huge problem. You said
Yep.
something that I just absolutely loved, and essentially paraphrasing is that you can grow yourself into bankruptcy. And
Yeah, that's true.
there's several things. I mean, you've got to be prepared for growth. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I have seen that has been very problematic with some companies that we've worked with is that there is not functional balance within the enterprise. You
Right.
know, they might be really focusing on marketing and sales, but their capacity to deliver on their
Yeah.
promise, operationally, maybe on the production line, they can't keep up with sales. And then you start upsetting customers. And then all of a sudden
Right.
you start getting bad reviews and it can really put you in the tank.
Yeah, it absolutely can. And you got me thinking about, I don't want to, do a separate podcast as we're on here, but some of these things in terms of helping an owner achieve their goals sort of bleed into one of the other issues that we as OneAccord face all the time in our business. And that's owner dependency, right? So even if
Mhm.
that owner is pretty capable, if their goal is to sell their business, and Nick, our CEO, has posted a lot about this lately, which I love because it's so true, is if a business relies solely on that owner for vendor relationships, customer relationships, it's going to diminish the value of the company at sale. And so sometimes you're coming in to simply help diffuse that a bit and show a potential buyer that this company has worth when Andrew goes away and retires or moves on. So that's
Right.
one of the other challenges we often face. But you also mentioned culture, and now I'll be referring back to the other podcasts I did, Value Factory podcasts I did. But culture to me is not just important, it's the most important thing, because I don't think you can accomplish the goals you set out for an organization unless you establish great culture and have people, feeling good about the work they're doing and feeling good about their contribution and all of the things that go along with that, like celebrating wins and making people feel appreciated. So I have always led with culture. Some people might lead with finance or lead with sales or whatever. I've just always felt it was the cornerstone of a successful business.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, culture permeates every nook and cranny of a business. One
Yeah.
of my favorite quotes is from Peter Drucker, and he said, I don't remember which of his books, but he said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Everybody
Right.
is so doggone focused on strategy,
Yeah.
and but if they don't have a healthy culture,
Yeah.
then that really causes problems. I've always thought and I'm being somewhat tongue in cheek, but I've always thought that dysfunctional business or a dysfunctional leadership team is redundant. I don't think you need to
Right.
say both. I mean,
Right.
everybody has some level of dysfunction, and it's about focusing, on shoring up your weak areas and
Yes.
doing it without causing damage to anybody else.
Yeah, and you've got to walk the talk, and that's just table stakes, I think. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it starts with culture.
Well, outstanding. Steve, this has been awesome, very enlightening learning about the founder's dilemma. Before we close out, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our audience that we haven't already covered?
No, I mean, I think that the work that we get to do in at OneAccord and partnering with these owners is, it can be life changing for folks that might be struggling or sort of find themselves over their heads. And so it's super fulfilling and satisfying work. And I think if you find those owners who have that self awareness, it's just a partner to, because it's lonely at the top thing, right? I mean, sometimes an owner doesn't really have anyone to lock arms with and go to battle with. And if we can help with that, it's really meaningful. So I'm, very, very proud and pleased to be a member of the team and be able to do the kind of work that we do. So I appreciate you, Andrew, and your time. And this has been fun for me.
Well, thank you, Steve. Hey, there may be some in our audience that want to connect with you to learn more about the founder's dilemma or talk about some of the
Yes.
critical success factors of being a leader and a CEO. How can our audience get in touch with you?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, steve.nasca at oneaccord.co is easy. I'm on LinkedIn, and, if that's a better avenue for you. So, yeah, please reach out. Let me know how I can help, or if you just want to bounce some ideas, I'm always game for that.
Awesome. And for our audience, Steve's last name, Nasca, is spelled Nasca. Did I get that
Correct.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Perfect.
You got it.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you again, sir. I so appreciate your time and talent. And as we wrap up here, thank you for joining us on the Value Factory presented by OneAccord. I am your host, Andrew Ballard. And until our next episode, have a great day. Continue to grow.
Thanks,
Thanks again,
Andrew.
Steve.
You bet.